afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Today's forum is sponsored by the Easton Community Foundation and by GBQ. Today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. Let's thank all of those supporting today's forum. Once a staple of both the suburban and urban scene, the American shopping mall has suffered a decline in recent decades. While high-end developments like Polaris Fashion Place and Easton Town Center continue to expand, many U.S. malls have closed. Conventional wisdom blames the rise of online retail, the declining popularity of department stores, and COVID lockdowns. A significant factor, however, is the disappearing American middle class, which we'll hear about today. To discuss the forces shaping retail's future in Ohio, please welcome today's speakers. Yaromir Steiner, the founder and chief executive officer of Steiner & Associates, and our host, Matt Barnes, morning co-anchor with NBC4 Today. You can learn more about today's speakers in your forum flyer. Matt, we look forward to today's conversation.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here and watching online. And Yaromir, thank you so much for being here. This is a fascinating thing as we all, get our holiday shopping done. And we don't really think about how much it has changed, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how long it's been. Just for those who don't know, and I know we talked about this over the phone, just the background into how you even came to Columbus in the first place, and how Easton Town Center kind of came to be the vision you had behind that wonderful place there.
Well, the Easton Town Center came to, Easton happened in Columbus because of Mr. Wexner. He was very frustrated by the American malls. And at a conference in Las Vegas, he gave a keynote speech about the malls, and he was almost booed out of the room about the kind of comments he was making. So he felt that Columbus needed a mall, and he was looking for someone to do it. In the meantime, I lived in Miami, in Coconut Grove, and I developed a project called Coco Walk. We still exist today. And that project had one of the number one store in the, at that time it was Limited Express, they used to call it, stores, and with very high sales per square foot. It was number one store, and Mr. Wexner had noticed that that project without department stores, cinemas as an anchor, nightclubs and restaurants as anchors, was his number one store in the country, no department store anchoring it. So he put that in a corner of his mind, and then years later, 7, 8 years later, when he was looking for someone here, our name was recommended to him, and then he approached us, and if we'd be interested to do it, and so I decided, became his partner. And just as an anecdote, not many people know, but the station building at Easton, the covered building, is an exact replica with a roof of Coco Walk in Coconut Grove, Miami. Now, Coconut Grove, Miami, that project was only 150,000 square feet. Easton is millions. But that piece is an exact replica with a roof. So that's the way we came. Initially, I was commuting here from Miami and spending a few days. And then one day, my wife, we had 4 kids, 2 of them going to college, 2 of them not in school yet. Then she was tired of raising the older ones in Miami, so he said, what about moving to Columbus and you commute the other way? So that's what we did. We moved here. We moved the company here. Many of my associates here moved here with me. And then we sold everything in Florida, and now we are based here.
I wonder, because, as a child of Columbus, and many of you hopefully are from here as well, I remember Easton coming up and, this new thing. But I also remember going to Eastland Mall all the time. That's near where I grew up. And now to know that Eastland is, while it's still standing, it's not what it used to be. Northland and Westland have closed. What has allowed Easton and Polaris and malls like that to still be successful and profitable, while other malls, what we would call the traditional American malls, City Center, another one of those, to no longer be standing anymore?
This is a very long conversation.
The shorter version, I guess.
Yeah. So, just to give orders of magnitude, at the peak, there were about 1,500 malls in the United States. That number today, viable malls, maybe 800, and the projection by the financial organizations is that there will be about 250 by 2030. So in the next 7-8 years, we'll lose more than half of what we have. The first thing to understand is that the malls disappearing is not the death of retail. I mean, the malls represent a very narrow category of retail. I mean, the malls used to represent about 15% of the sales in the United States, or 15% of the surface. So, and one of the main reasons of their disappearance is, I mean, you mentioned in the openings, is the disappearance of the middle class. Our country is becoming a country of buyers on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, I want to oversimplifying. On one end, you have the Dollar General, who is adding 250, 300 stores a year, and their competitors, Dollar Tree, same thing, you know, serving that end of the market. And then on the other end, you have, very luxury brands, you know, who are doing extremely well right now. That is, the middle has basically emptied, basically. Everything moved to both ends. The numbers I used was that in between Second World War and 1980, that's a 35-year period, based on the IRS tax returns, so these are returns, it's not some statistic picked from somewhere, these are basic data from the IRS, the top 10% taxpayers claimed 30% of the income. And then the bottom 90% of the taxpayers claimed the remaining, 70%. After 1980, with the supply side economics to today, that is 35 years later, today the top 10% taxpayers claim 50% of the income, and the bottom 90% of the Americans claim the other 50% of the income. That's a huge reduction, because the 90% of the Americans were the consumers of the malls. They were the ones who lived essentially paycheck to paycheck, spend most of their money, and the malls were very prosperous. But when that 90% of the Americans lost, their income down to about 50%, from 70 to 50%, that's a 30% reduction. So that period, for those of you old enough to know, not everybody is the age here, but for example, there were no power centers before 1980. I mean, the Marshalls, the Home Depots, and so forth. I mean, you have the small Ace hardware store. So we invented the power centers. For example, Gap did not have Old Navy. Gap invented Old Navy. There was no warehouse clubs before 1980. You know, the Costco's, the Sam's Clubs, and so forth. They were invented. There were no outlet centers before 1980. So the poverty of the middle class required that other forms of retail get invented to satisfy the merchandise needs, and then the ends, so a mall used to be, the kind of discretionary spending environment, did not have enough customers. So that's why there's less of them. I did not answer your question, so you'll ask me more probably. I mean, not answer your question about why is Easton surviving, et cetera, but I mean, first you have to understand there are fundamental forces who make that, the high-end retailers cannot do well. At Easton, we serve the discretionary spending of the customer, the people who have extra dollar to spend. That is, we don't serve what we call necessity or replenishment retail. Necessity replenishment retail is the grocery store when you need things. You need underwear, you need this, you need that. At Easton, essentially, we serve the discretionary spending. That is the other end of the budget. That is when you take care of your needs, what's left over, that we serve. And for that, there is not enough demand. Columbus had 3 malls in 1970. Today, it has, 2 viable malls, and with a population growth of almost 60, 70%.
And I guess, what does that say then? Because we're adding people, but the shopping centers aren't being added as well. They're just going to mainly those 2, and then I guess online shopping. They're going to, like you said, the power centers.
Let me also demystify the idea of the online retail is killing retail. That's not a major issue. The online sales are going to represent 20% and ultimately maybe 25%. But The online sales that, as calculated by the census, by the government's Department of Commerce, include three components. It includes people who have always been online. You remember, you used to buy from catalogs, you used to order medicine by mail, etc. So that's counted in those numbers, and that's represent about a third, maybe a little bit less than a third, maybe 28% of online sales. The remaining 70% is equally divided between pure platforms. A retail platform is Amazon, is eBay, is Etsy, is Wayfair, the brands who basically don't make anything but sell other people's stuff. So it's a platform, like a mall in a way. It's a virtual mall in the sky. I don't make anything. We don't manufacture anything. We sell things done by others. So Amazon that virtually, that represents about half of the remaining 70%. And the other half is the regular retailers, that you all know, who sell online. When you buy from Target, from Walmart, from Gap, from Old Navy online, this helps the retailers. So today, in general, the existence of online retailing has not hurt the brands, accelerated maybe time. The weaker ones disappeared faster, the one who could not adopt, but basically, they survived. And then, yes, the sales are happening in the more of the discretionary environment. Maybe I should make another parenthesis. When you go shopping, there are two kinds of shopping: need-based shopping, want-based shopping. Need-based shopping is replenishment shopping. That is, you keep buying the same things over and over again: the toilet paper, the food, the eggs, the things, etc. The want-based shopping is discretionary spending. On the need-based shopping, decision-making is pretty much rational. On the want-based shopping, it's more aspirational. You can carry everything you put in a Louis Vuitton bag in a plastic bag, get for free from the grocery store. So, there's no reason to buy any Louis Vuitton bags. If you think rationally.
Everyone hear that? Okay.
So what happens is the proportion of what is discretionary has been shrinking in America, and then basically, the need-based retailers are taking more of the dollars.
Another question I always thought about, too, is, we're noticing, I always think with like sports stadiums, they're moving back from the suburbs back to the urban areas, downtown, because people want an experience. They want to go to the game and then go get something to drink out of a restaurant, things like that. But then I feel like the malls that were all downtown and many other cities, including Columbus, aren't there anymore. What did you notice there in terms of it just didn't work in downtown centers?
No,
retail
this is, again, I'm sorry, it's going to take a longer explanation again. We are describing 50-year cycles, so you cannot describe them, so here's what happened, it happened. Mm-hmm. Actually, there are about 3 or 4 reasons why downtowns died. We need to explain that first. And the 4 or 5 reasons happened between 1925 and 1950. Mm-hmm. And the first one is Euclid. Not the mathematician, the city of Euclid in Ohio, who passed the first zoning ordinance in 1925. There was no zoning before in the United States. The cities were designed by planners. They made them beautiful. All the names, Pierre L'Enfant, Olmsted, etc. And so it created the zoning. One of my colleagues, Ambler Realty, sued the city, lost. The Supreme Court said, no, zoning is something acceptable land use. It doesn't violate the Fifth Amendment. Probably the same thing today might go the other way, but that was what I call the socializing period of the world, and common interest was more dominant than private interest. So basically, the Supreme Court said, you can zone all you want. Separate uses. Residential goes here, malls, retail goes here, industrial buildings goes here. Then we have the economic collapse in the United States and the world in the 1920s and 30s. We went to the war. So nobody used the zoning to create cities. But after the war, suddenly we wanted to build all kinds of things. Nobody had the time to hire the Olmsteds and Pierre L'Enfants to design the cities so we can build them. It became, what happened in Long Island, everywhere else. You buy the land, you say it's residential, get engineers to draw squares, put houses in them, and then the malls created in basically the retail zoning areas, and they became malls. Because the zoning did not allow mixed use. You could not put a mall like at Easton, have offices on top, apartments around the corner. That was not allowed. So if retail is going to be only retail, when the malls get created. The second thing that happened was the Eisenhower Act President Eisenhower, I mean, you know him, I mean, in the 50s was the president, but he was also the supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe. And as a young lieutenant in the 1920s, he had a convoy going from Washington to the West Coast. It took them 3 months to cross the United States. And they may have gone by National Highway 40 maybe at the time, I don't know. And when he goes to war in Germany, he's admiring all the Autobahns, I mean, all the Panzer divisions going right and left, fast. So he felt that the United States, to defend against Russia and others, had to build its own network of roads. So our freeway system is like the internet. Military necessity created them, and funded by the federal government. But the idea was that those freeways will come to the cities like Columbus, stop at the outer loop, and then that was it. Well, federal money, the city said, wait a minute, can we get those roads to come all the way to downtown while we are at it? And then so what happened, it made it very easy for people to be able to commute from downtown to the suburbs. So that's number 2. Number 3, FHA. As you know, after the war, a veteran could buy a house for $1, essentially. They loaned all the money to them. But if you owned a house in Italian Village here and you want to redo your kitchen, you could not borrow $1,000. But you could borrow $50,000 to buy a house. So essentially people went where, it was easier to build. That was suburbs as well. And then finally, the famous Firestone case, some attorneys might know how General Motors, Firestone, Goodyear, et cetera, got together to dismantle basically the trolley systems by buying them out and then closing them so people can buy more cars. So, those 4 things together basically push America to the suburbs, and they created the malls in the suburbs, and destroyed the downtowns. So that is why they died.
Exactly. It's an amazing explanation. It's very detailed, and you did summarize it very well, actually. So if it's so the downtown malls, it doesn't look like that's the future there. Online shopping we know is the future because everything's online, but it's not going to be everything retail. What is the future of how we think we'll be shopping and where we'll be shopping?
Yeah, so what happened though, things start changing. In the 1980s, America woke up and we started saying, wait a minute, we added 100 million people after the war and we have less downtowns than before. What's wrong with us? Well, zoning is wrong because zoning says, I remember the story. I was in Kansas City doing a Zona Rosa mixed-use project like Easton, and the city was very proud to tell me that that parcel of land allowed mixed use. You could put apartment, you can put offices, you can put retail on the same parcel, and they saw that as being very advanced. So we present our first plans, and the guy says, you have apartments on top of retail. I said, well, you told me we can do that. He said, no, they have to be 80-foot separation between them. The zoning was a problem. So you could not create those things. So it required PUDs and so forth. And then the CNU was created, Council for New Urbanism, that architects in the room must know. And they basically once-to-one said, no, wait a minute, we need to start focusing on the public domain. We need to do things differently. And then, projects like Easton came and proved the point, and then people realized, and things start coming back, and then the suburban malls then were kind of the odd place out. Only retail, and then all people in the room remember the cinemas used to be on the outskirts of the mall even, so that the parking did not compete, and then restaurants were on the periphery, not very, attractive environments, And what happened is people are looking for environments who are experiential. Basically today, if you say, how do you create an Easton, you basically, and Easton served as a model to, dozens of projects around the country. And basically, you create a sense of place. The public space is the most important thing first. And then you surround it by retail. I grew up in Istanbul, so in Mediterranean, went to college in France, so food is important. So Easton has 45 food venues, and that's what you create. And then you put the merchants in, and then you activate the spaces. You organize events so it acts. And then at the beginning, we could not do mixed use. At Easton, we put the offices on top. Today, offices, apartments, hotels, everything get mixed together. So we are recreating the urban fabric, which is the eternal. So we went for an urban accident of history, by creating malls for about 50, 60 years, and now we are coming back to our senses.
And how much of, and we talked about this, shopping centers like Easton, works is that it can be a generational thing too, right? Where, you can go there as a teenager, you can go there and as 80 years old, and you kind of grow with it. And there are different experiences you can have.
I mean, and we discussed that with Matt because, I mean, I didn't realize that he was a teenager when we opened, and then, his first date, and I'm not going into details, but no, but you're right. I mean, if you want a place like Easton, I mean, we see everyone from the 5-year-old who admires the little train to the 80-year-old who buys things from their grandchildren, and our food offering, our retail offering, they are really microcosms of the communities we serve. I mean, all income levels or age groups are represented. And now we are adding this mixed-use component. I mean, we used to have offices. Now we have more of them, more hotels, more apartments, and things like that. I mean, the ultimate goal for us is to transform Easton into a neighborhood. I mean, we are more of a neighborhood than, say, Polaris or Tuttle Crossing, but not quite a neighborhood. Still, it's a project. And our goal is to make them into true neighborhoods, and that's the holy grail.
I still find it fascinating, though, because we have this shrinking middle class, and so we have, the shopping centers like Easton, Polaris, Tuttle, and then the Dollar Generals are doing so well. I mean, they're popping up everywhere. Dollar Tree, which stuff is now $1.25 there, so it's a little misleading, but they're having to make obviously changes themselves, but. I mean, do we expect that growth to keep happening too, as you see, the way consumers are spending and, kind of the way the money is being spread apart? So
I mean, if you want to talk about the future, we have to separate them. The want-based retail, the Easton types, more of them are going to happen. And the way you have to think of a project like Easton generically is it's an organized, physical transactional and gathering environment, organized physical transactional gathering environment. Whereas Amazon is a virtual transactional environment. It's not a gathering environment, and it's not physical, obviously. So these are the two things that are going to go into the future, and environments who cater to discretionary spending, like Easton, have to parallel as much as possible what Amazon does with the advantages it has of being physical. That is, restaurants and bars and going out and lighting trees, doing all kinds of things you cannot do virtually. You try to do it in those environments, and those environments have a future. But remember, I said physical transactional environments. I didn't say shopping centers. That means that today a well-organized short north can become that. When Easton opened 3 years later, I was giving a speech somewhere. I don't know, maybe it was something like this, but I don't remember. And I said, Easton's competition is not the other malls, it's downtown. And that's clearly downtown came back, short north came back, is doing well. But these environments have the potential, if they put the right ingredients, to become true transactional physical gathering environments. So that's what's going to happen on the end where we are talking about discretionary spending, right? That the things that you do because you have extra money. But discretionary spending doesn't have to Louis Vuitton bag. I don't want to mislead you. I mean, going to a bar after work with colleagues and have a beer, that's a discretionary spending. It has an emotional content. That's what's important. So it's not the dollar amount, it's where the money is coming from. Is it the first dollar? How many eggs can I buy for $2? Or is it extra money I have, I'm going to do something with it? So that's what's going to happen there. More and more cities are going to create environments who will be experiential, who will basically cater to that customer. Then on the other hand, you have the need-based environments. And those environments are doing well. Grocery store anchored shopping centers or the power centers, with all those stores are doing well. They are going to continue to do well. Their disruptor is going to be automation and robotization, artificial intelligence. I mean, if you want ultimately, I'm going maybe 30 years out, if you want a grocery store is a microcosm, right? On one half of it, you have discretionary spending, the extra stuff, that is the cheese, the meat, the fish, the fruits, the vegetables, the wine. And then you turn to the left, typically, and then you have the shelves, the warehouse, where you buy your cereal, your boxes, and stuff like that. The portion that is need-based, that is that left side, which is because always a customer always turns right instinctively, so that's the way you organize the circuit. And so in the need-based environment, on those shelves, they are pretty much going to disappear. it will become robotic. I mean, you'll go to a touch screen, you will say everything you want, or you'll send an email ahead of time. The robots will pick those things, either from a space in the basement or in the roof, and will have ready by the time you walk out. So when you go to a grocery store, you will buy your discretionary spending, that you will pick your salmon or your fish or your thing, your wine, and then by the time you come out, the box will be waiting for you, because a robot can pick about 450 items an hour. The shoppers that we send to deliver things at home can pick only 40, 50 items an hour. So that will have to be automated. So that's going to be the future in those areas. So our grocery store will become kind of smaller area accessible by us, and then but the inventory will be automated. So what will happen is that those shelves who are picked by the robots will also be replenished by the robots from the truck to the shelves, and the trucks will be loaded from the central warehouses automatically as well. I mean, that's the long term where things are going to go in this kind of uses. And obviously then the question becomes, and in Britain that already exists, can Columbus have 3 major warehouses delivering your food, the items that you order online, and not really have all those stores all over the place where you go in. But to pick your cheese, your salmon, you want them still close to your home. So it's going to be a combination. I mean, I'm trying to make you dream a little bit where things are going, in the long term into the future. I might be dead by then. But.
For the record, ever since you told me about everyone turns right instinctively, I've noticed that every time I've gone to the grocery store, like, oh, I'm going left first, just to prove the point that I refuse to do that. You did kind of mention this already, but because I was thinking specifically about the Short North as a way where small businesses can thrive in this. If you still want to have an in-person store, is the Short North the kind of a model for other cities and places that's the way you kind of have to do it? Because there may be a space for you in those other shopping centers, but you can thrive in an urban setting with a model like that?
No, you can. I mean, a good example of a successful, street retail environment is the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, in California, in New York, in Los Angeles. I mean, that's a street owned by multiple property owners, but through an effort of the municipality, organized in a coherent package, and then it can work. I mean, I'm not talking only small retailers. I mean, legitimate retailers can succeed on the Short North. I mean, we dream about it, but first you have to solve the parking problem. There has to be a centralized thinking about parking. How do you provide the parking to the customers? And then there has to be a centralized merchandising strategy, because every landlord rather rents to a bar who pays more rent than to a bookstore. Bookstores don't pay rent. So, well, then you don't have a bookstore. So there is to be a balancing, between the high rent payers like restaurants, bars, jewelry stores, and so forth, versus the bookstore and some of the apparel tenants. So that merchandising mix is important, and aligning the economic interest of independent property owners. Mm-hmm. Then you can create that. It can be done. I mean, there are examples of that, but it requires organizational effort.
I wonder, as you've now lived in Columbus as long as you've had, what makes this such a great city for retail? And because it's blowing up everywhere. You're seeing, Dublin with Bridge Park, creating its own area. I'm sure in, 5 to 10 years, we'll be talking about 3 or 4 more suburbs in the Central Ohio area with properties like that. What has made it such a great place to build and to see people, move here, shop here, eat here, all that?
I think it's because we are in Ohio. No, I mean, I say that in a very tender and gentle way, because I came to the United States, to Houston, to Texas. I was 28-year-old. Texas, you get very quick. Texas flag everywhere. I bought my boots. I had my first car was a town car, because I thought that's what Americans drive, and I lived in Texas. Then I lived in New York, Manhattan. I lived on Broadway in 56. That's a different thing. Then you learn a minute a block. You have to walk fast. You don't make eye contact. I mean, it's just a different world. I mean, very strong personality. Like the Texans are the Texans. In fact, Texans are not one kind. I mean, Houstonians are Houstonians. And then New Yorkers are New Yorkers. Then I moved to Miami, Florida. I mean, that's also strong personality. I mean, you have to apologize. Sorry, I don't speak Spanish, and then you operate. And then the different notion of time and exactitude and things like that. And, and then I moved to Columbus, to Ohio. It was So I mean, after those, Houston, New York, Manhattan, and then Miami, and coming here, at the beginning, you don't know. I mean, I did not even know how the Ohio flag looked like until about, a few years living here, whereas in Texas, you know it the next day, and then, but slowly it grew on me, and there's a book about the Wright brothers, but McCullough, if you have not read it. I mean, it's describing the Wright brothers is really describing Ohio. Tinkerers, honest, loyal people who work hard. And I mean, I don't know, there is lots of strength in this state, a fundamental strength, which is not spectacular. We don't brag about things, and we get things done, I mean, I think that's one Ohio strength, and Columbus is in Ohio. And then it's not me, but I discovered that also it's a good test market, whether it's McDonald's or Wendy's or L Brands or Procter & Gamble. They always try to test their product in this area because we have the right mix of population, instincts, and so forth. And then, I mean, the thing that we always claim, but many other cities say the same thing, but that we work together well. We work with the government, and we work with the private groups, and we are creative. And then some leaders. It's going to sound like a cliche, but without people like Mr. Wexner, Mr. McCoy, and Mr. Wolf, these people cared more about their community than sometimes themselves. The generosity was significant. In Houston, there's generosity, but it's to put your name on the stadium or the name on the symphony and things like that. Here, the generosity is more fundamental, and that, I think these are the reasons. You can probably think it through yourselves. That's my take.
No, that's very fair. We're going to move to questions for our live stream and in-person audience in a second. If you have a question, you can make your way to the microphone. That is right there in the back. And again, we love questions here for Yaromir. And again, we'll cultivate from the live stream as well. But before we get to that, one more. Obviously, we're going through a pandemic right now. And we have seen, some retailers not get through it as well as others. What was your biggest concern about the future of retail during the pandemic and how people's minds have changed? Because so many people were not going out and they were just shopping online, whether it was groceries, whether it was that discretionary spending. Was there concern about where things may go and how they may shake out once this pandemic is over?
For us, there wasn't, because Easton has been ahead of its time. This pandemic accelerated trends that were happening. Not a single trend in the world of retail was any different than what happened before, except it went faster. The tenants who were weak died faster. The tenants who could not adapt to the internet disappeared first. The mall who were on the verge of surviving, like Tuttle, basically died. So the acceleration of time, that's what happened. We were pretty much on the right side of history. And today, and I'm not saying that to brag about Easton or about Columbus, but in the nation, we are cited as an example of everything anchored by restaurants, physical environments. All those things now are, recognized as being the way things have to be. The part that was scary to us was the total collapse of the legal system. You have leases with tenants that people sign. There are attorneys in the room. They know. It's a mutual obligation. Mm-hmm. When one of them defaults, you go and hang them on the thing. You get the sheriff in, you lock the door, you fire them, etc. But when all 250 of them default at the same time, then it's like a mob. What do you do? But then, everything gets fixed, and So, frankly, my biggest concern right now, and that's in everyone's life, when things go real well, this is the time to throw it away and start again, because you get too complacent. You think, okay, well, everybody's copying us, we are the best, and so forth. We have lots of, not anxiety, but lots of tension about trying to figure out with our teams about what the future should like and how much more we need to adapt, to what's happening.
Well, again, it's a long-standing tradition here at Columbus Metropolitan Club to take audience questions. So if you have any, please join Jane there in the back. Something that you're thinking about the future of retail, or just something you've always want to ask Yaromir. But we are, again, curating questions from the live stream audience. So, Jane, if there's one, you feel free to tell us.
Sure. Well, we actually are not live streaming today. We have a little bit of a technical glitch, so I'm going to depend on other folks here in the audience to come up with some great questions, and I have a couple to start out with. I am old enough to remember when Easton came online, and I know your comment about Coconut Grove, where you lived, and the mall that you developed down there. And at the time, I remember scratching my head, well, that might work in Miami, but it's cold here. Were there concerns and an additional risk factor of putting a mall like that, an Easton, where it can be 10 degrees below zero on Christmas Eve?
You know, that was a very common comment. In fact, lots of people said, you know, this guy is speaking with an accent, he's coming from Miami, and he wants to be an open-air mall, and we have 14 inches of snow every year, you know. So, but, you know, they thought Les was crazy, so, you know, you never know. But, you know, frankly, the thing which was reassuring to me is because, you know, I traveled a lot. I lived in many places. So, I mean, even in America, you can go to Chicago, and, I mean, there's a retail street, and there is an Old Orchard, which is an open-air mall that has been doing well, and around the world, I mean, you know, in Scandinavia, I mean, you go to Copenhagen or to colder climates, I mean, everything is not in a mall. There are streets, and people shop on them. That was my conviction that it was going to work, and thankfully, Mr. Wexner gave me the opportunity to prove it.
Yeah. We're a hardy bunch in Ohio, that's all. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Go for it, Carol.
I'm Carol Looper, and I am an Easton shopper. I can get around Easton probably with my eyes closed, or I could. During the pandemic, for about the past year and a half, I have been amazed at the building, the construction, the new restaurants and bars, hotel, restoration hardware, and all of the things that have been added to Easton during a time when the economy was so questionable. What thoughts did you have? What crystal ball did you have? What made you continue to expand and develop?
Thank you for asking the question this way, but we had initiated those efforts before, and we just continued them, you know, we finished them during that time. And I mean, if you want, what we are seeing is the consistency of our thinking. I mean, these whole sections we added, you know, were, you know, part of our thinking about where the future was. And frankly, we were surprised, honestly, about their success. I mean, they exceeded our expectations to the point that we were wondering if the expansion was not going to hurt the rest of the environment, which it didn't. But then, since then, one of the good things of the crisis was it to do some cleanup for us. Easton has never been more than 3% vacant. You know, so it's very difficult when there's a new tenant comes, okay, where are we going to put them? You know, okay, can we move tenants around, et cetera? I mean, there are tenants, I'm not going to name them, that we moved 3 times to be able to, you know, make room for someone else. With this crisis, with all the bankruptcies, we got 10% vacancy. So that was good. That's a pretty much standard in the industry, but for us that was new. So, and then there's something else that you should all know. You get tracked by your phones, not by me, by, I don't know what that is, the software world. So when you go somewhere, people know your IP number and they follow you, and you cannot stop that. I mean, that's happening. That's not something you can get. You cannot connect the number to the person, but you know. So if, for example, you always go to the cinema to Brio, after a while we'll know that there is someone who goes to cinema to Brio repeatedly, but we are talking about tens of thousands of people. That data now is publicly available. It's like all demographic data we used to have, you know, what are the incomes of neighborhoods and so forth. So today, the retailers look at the world, at the map of the United States, and they are trying to say, where are the places where the most people go? And developers cannot lie anymore. You see, before, you know, a developer would say, I have a great project, come to me, here's my tenant, my merchants, my sales, all unverifiable. Today, they are verifiable. So because the data is verifiable, people then go to the best places, and we are, I mean, among the top 10 destinations in the United States. So suddenly we are swamped by people who want to be here. We have more people who want to be at Easton than we have space, even today now. So that's what's happening. I mean, the availability of transparency on the data and the reality prevailing, you know, because before people did not think that in Columbus such an environment was possible. People think Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Houston, et cetera, and suddenly, you know, they compare us to Ala Moana in Honolulu, I mean, or Roosevelt Fields in Long Island. I mean, we are one of the top malls in the country. So before, it was consequence of what we had planned, so we implemented. Now, it's basically the reaction to that's the successful place we want to be.
Hello, thank you so much for your kind words and just generous thought that you've shared with us. My name is Dr. Pamela Ellis. My firm is Compass College Advisory. And one of the phrases that you kept saying often was transactional gathering event. And one of the things I think we've learned through this experience of COVID is people want more in the way of relationships. And so what would you say to how we can transform town centers to be more relational gathering spaces?
I mean, that was one of our driving forces. Why do we have restaurants at Easton? And restaurants, they come in two kinds. There's the celebratory kinds and the functional kinds. A food court, like you have them at Polaris, is a functional restaurant. That means that you shop, you stop, you grab something, you continue, but you don't take your date, to go to the food court. At Easton, those tenants, there are only 5 or 6 of them. The remaining tenants are all celebratory places because a celebration, whether it's you are sharing a beer with a colleague, or you are a 15-year-old with your first date, or I take my wife for our anniversary, they are all loaded with emotional content. So then you associate the place to the emotional content. So basically, in order to create places who are more interactive, you need to create, would you rather go to a freestanding, Red Lobster in the middle of the parking lot, or would you like to have it, on the short north, on a street with things you can do before and after? That's basically what's going to happen. We are going to find that food is going to be the gathering place, like it has been in all cultures, actually, and then create open air spaces in front of them, indoor, outdoor dining, and creating interesting menus, and that's the way we are doing it.
So you obviously are very, very knowledgeable about the economic trends of the last 50, 80 years. What kinds of things do you read, and where do the rest of us catch up with some of that kind of reading to be able to understand this stuff?
I'm sorry, what is the question?
Where do we catch up to what do you
read to understand those trends in the economy?
I would recommend 2 books, but both of them, a quarter of them are footnotes, so they're not like casual reading that, you find newspapers. One is Thomas Piketty's book, Piketty, P-E-C-K. You can email me, I will give it to you. He's a French economist, and he wrote that book about capital in the 21st century. He was kind of trying to copy Karl Marx's title, Das Kapital. This is kind of a new version of it, where he teaches that he's the one, this is where I picked my statistics about the IRS and the income distribution in the United States. And a short version of it exists. There's a 30-page version you can buy, just, like a Cliff Notes kind of. And where he's saying that when income equality increases, it always leads to catastrophes, problems, like the Russian Revolution, or even the French Revolution historically before that, or the Second World War, and he feels that that is increasing. The second book I would recommend you to read is a book called Generations, and the more recent, the same authors, professors, called Fourth Turning. That's a book which shows that in American history, from the 1600s to today, there are 4 types of generation who come in cycles over and over and over again. In our case, the 4th cycle would be the silent generation, the baby boomers, the Gen X, the millennials, and now the Gen Z. The Gen Z are a copy of the silent generation, for example, and that cycle goes in about 88, 90-year cycle. And then there are difficult times, better times, etc. Like, for example, we are entering a difficult time because when the boomers get old, that generation we are called the civic generation. When a civic generation gets old, there's always risk of problems. Last time that happened was the American Revolution, then the Civil War 80 years later, then the Second World War 80 years later, and now we are 80 years later from the Second World War. And that's an interesting book to read. It will really give you a sense of even for example, the role of women in society. They are the same periods of Me Too movements in history, actually adjusted for times, as it is today. Even approach to sexuality or we educate our children come in cycles of 80 years. These are interesting books to read.
Great. Everybody's got their Christmas wish list now, right? Awesome.
And now we heard an 80-year depression cycle coming.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Well, I'm due for a new book, so that's good. At the table, we had an interesting conversation. You commented that we're all doing better now than probably any other time. I mean, those of us who have gotten through COVID, more money in the bank, we've saved money, we're doing things, but yet we're sad. Talk a little bit more about that comment, and what should we do?
I will know never to confide things at the table. No, I mean, what I was saying is, you're right. I mean, today households have more cash than they ever had. The credit card debts are significantly down. Jobs are plentiful, but still there's a sadness in the air, and I don't know why. I mean, I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know it's this division of the country, but we are not the only ones. I mean, similar things I observe in France, similar things are happening in Turkey, where I was born. Germany, maybe not as much. So, I mean, it depends on the country, but that problem exists. And I don't know why. I mean, normally periods like this, I mean, again, you study the history, will give birth to a spiritual rejuvenation, So are we at the brink of maybe rediscovering those things? I don't know. I mean, in order to keep your balance in a world like this, I recommend you meditate every day.
I have one last one, and maybe you're giving away a secret here, but are there any projects you're envisioning here? Is there a concept that is kind of pie in the sky in your mind that you'd love to do, just can't do it? But I know you're always thinking, and you're looking at trends, you're looking at everything. What can we look forward to? Besides the robots.
I have people here watching me say, don't say anything.
I know.
No, that's a typical of every interview about ends always, is there anything you would like to announce, so we can then, put them in the newspapers.
That's my job.
So, well, I mean, first, in the existing model of Easton, the way we have it, in the next 3 to 6 months, you're going to hear announcements that are going to be spectacular. That's all I can tell you, because they will kill me otherwise. And frankly, we have also legal obligations why we cannot speak. So I cannot say things, but you are going to find things who will put us on the forefront of the nation, and also a few other things. On the bigger picture, on my dreams, but where I have lots of controllers, in the company, we put people in different groups. I am part of the wonder invention kind of guys, and then I have like 6 or 7 people who filter me. So I cannot do everything I want to do. But the kind of things we are thinking about, how far do we take a brick and mortar environment like Easton, and then compare to Amazon? So, for example, you are looking for a shirt. You go on Google, say shirts. Well, Amazon will come always first, right? And they will give you shirts of this kind, this kind, etc. Easton never comes up. Or very seldom. One of our merchants might come up, Untuckit or something like that, but not Easton. So how do we organize ourselves so that the brick and mortar platform is equivalent to an Amazon presence online? And then how can we give you access to the inventory of the retailers where you can come and pick them up? And then how can we deliver them the same day? Easton already delivers the same day. Anything you order at Easton will be delivered to you in Columbus the same day for free. So we do that, but it's not very well known, et cetera. So that's then other things we are dreaming about is, can we create a labor model like Uber, for example, where we have, say, Easton has a list of 8,000 names of people who like to work in retail. But like in Uber, there's a little picture, there's a 1-minute video, you have the qualifications of the person, what that person is capable of, sell lingerie, jewelry, menswear, etc. And then you can hire that person online, that a retailer can hire that person online and then pay them online, like an Uber driver, for example. That's the kind of things we are thinking about, and a long way to go.
So in other words, you're not slowing down at any time soon here, right?
Not yet.
And then, beyond Easton, just as you look across America here, what are you seeing in other cities too that inspire you? What other projects have you looked at and said, you know what, I want a little piece of that, or you've gone to visit and been really impressed by?
I don't think there's one city in particular. There are many, many great ideas, but one area which I'm really interested in is modular construction. How to build apartments for 30% cheaper by manufacturing them in plants, like cars are made in plants. And also, frankly, what's happening, inclusion and diversity, racial diversity, in our business world, is that something that preoccupies me and my team right now about what we can do about it.
Well, Yaromir, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. This is a lot of good information. And hopefully you all enjoyed that as well. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope that you all really did find it as interesting and insightful. I feel like I have a reading list, and now I'm just so curious about so many more things, so I so appreciate this conversation. We will be taking a holiday break over the next 2 weeks, but please make plans now to join us on January 5th as CMC presents its annual Blue Chip Economic Forecast. And thank you to our sponsors, the Easton Community Foundation and GBQ. Thank you to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream, even though it didn't actually get to be presented, I don't think, in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch, but we still thank them. And our special appreciation to today's speakers, Yaromir Steiner and our host, Matt Barnes. And again, thank you all of you for joining us. We could not do this without you. We look forward to seeing you on January 5th as the Columbus Metropolitan Club presents another community conversation. And happy holidays to everyone.